Can we talk about Tales of Arise Beyond the Dawn? Before it comes out, I mean. Or at least for me anyway. At the time of recording this, it is the 8th of November at 8:30 at night. So for me, the DLC doesn't come out for another 3.5 hours. And I won't be playing it for another 10 hours, maybe. But I'm so excited for the DLC to come out. And having seen a lot of the lead up to the DLC coming out, I have a lot of thoughts about the things that they have shown us, the trailers, the marketing, and the 3 Prelude stories that were released, which we'll get to in a minute, but there were 3 Prelude stories released by the Tales team for each of the pairs of characters leading up to the release of Beyond the Dawn, each as a sort of prologue to the actual expansion itself. And I have so many thoughts on those, so I thought it might be fun to discuss those a little bit later in this video. But first I do want to talk a little bit about my current impressions of Beyond the Dawn and what I know going in, because I think it's just fun to speculate. That being said, this is a speculative video, and it's going up after the expansion is already going to be out. So, could I please ask that if you happen to know anything spoilery, please don't comment with your spoilers. I would rather not be spoiled on the ending of the DLC before I get a chance to play it myself, and I'm sure that goes for a lot of other people as well. Speaking of which, if you are 100% blind to the DLC, maybe don't watch this video if you're wanting to stay blind, because I do know a few things from the trailers and stuff that we're going to be discussing here. I think that's generally everything I needed to say before we start, so let's jump on in. What do I already know about what's going to be in the DLC? So, to cut a long story short, I've seen the first trailer, and I watched the event that they did at Tokyo Game Show. Other than that, I've mostly avoided spoilers for the DLC, and as much speculation as I could. I have seen some of the marketing tweets from the Tales team, and I have obviously read the Prelude novels. I'm calling them novels, they're not that long, but we'll get there. So if I remember correctly, what I know from the first trailer, because I saw that live, that happened live. I reacted to that one live. What I know from the first trailer is what it showed us of the story, the characters, and some of the locations. I know that there's going to be a new character who is core to the story named Nazamil, and I know that she won't be playable. I know from some of their marketing that Nazamil, I keep calling her Naz. I know that apparently she is the daughter of a lord, a Renin lord, and a Danin, which is very interesting, and I have many questions and thoughts about that one, but we'll get there. I've mostly avoided getting in on the speculation about who the father might be, or potentially mother, who the Renin parent might be, who the lord might be. I don't want to speculate too much about it, because I think it's probably fairly obvious who it'll be, but they might go for the non-obvious choice, so who knows? So I'm not going to speculate too much on that one, but I do know that much about Nazamil. I don't know much about her otherwise. I have thoughts about where her story might go, considering what was shown in the trailer, how she was talking about erasing all differences, wearing some sort of a mask that looked a bit like Alphen's old mask. I think that possibly that might come into play with a big conflict during the DLC, maybe she tries to erase all differences between people. I'm not sure. I don't want to think about that one too much, because obviously that seems like it'll be the main plot, but it definitely interests me, and I'm looking forward to see what they do with that. To be fair, I've not thought that much about Nazamil. I've thought a lot more about the other characters. So what do I know about how the other characters are at the minute? So I know that Alphen, a year on, because this is all a year on from the game, I know that he is renowned worldwide. He is known as the Blazing Sword, and he is legendary to some and a pariah to others. Everyone has very divisive, mixed feelings about him, and he's struggling with his place in the world with all this attention on him. I know that Shionne has also been travelling with Alphen, apparently to seal things, like some sort of ruins or something, but I'm not 100% sure on what. At this point anyway, we'll get to the Prelude novels. We'll get there. This is all information that I saw in the Tokyo Game Show presentation, by the way, because they went through... It was in Japanese, so just as a disclaimer, I know bits and pieces of the information because I was talking with some other people as we were watching it together and we were trying to interpret it. I don't know that much Japanese. And to be fair, I intentionally did not translate for myself some of the information. I just translated the stuff that I knew I would be very, very interested in, which, oh wow, fittingly, was mostly about Lord Rinwell, who I'll talk about now. Basically, they gave a quick, what would you call it? A quick account of where the character is at the beginning of the DLC, and they also showed 3 skits, each one kind of focused on one of the pairs. The pairs, just in case anyone doesn't know, being alphen and shionne, Lord Rinwell, and dohalim and kisara, because those are the big 3 pairs that they center all of their marketing and everything around, and really the story as well. They're foils to each other. So I know for Law, he has been in Calaglia working with the Crimson Crows and helping the resistance, and he often visits Rinwell in Vicent, but makes excuses about it. So he's not... He's making excuses to go to Vicent to see Rinwell without actually saying he's going to see Rinwell, if that makes any sense. I also know that he wants to live up to his dad's legacy and doesn't feel like he measures up to him yet, to Zephyr's legacy, which is very sad, and we'll get there soon. I'll talk about things soon, it's fine. I know for Rinwell, she is in Vicent. She is studying her magic. She's come to terms with her identity and wants to learn more about it and her powers, and she hopes to find other mages. At least that's what I got from the skit that they showed us. That's the only skit that I translated for myself properly because I wanted to know what that skit was about. And to be fair, I did understand bits of it anyway, but yeah, she specifically wants to hopefully find other mages out there. We'll see if that actually happens. It'd be really interesting, actually. I'd love to know more about the mages in general. That's always been something I've been super interested in with her eyes. Anyway, as for Kisara, she's also in Vicent, but at the time of my writing notes about this, I didn't remember why, and I didn't remember what her personal issue was going to be. I think I avoided spoilers for Kisara and dohalim. I think because I mostly got to the Law and Rinwell parts, translated theirs, and then kind of ignored what was happening with the others. Which sounds terrible, I know, but... Listen, I'm biased, what can I say? As for dohalim, he is in Pelagian. He is helping the Renans to settle, and he's acting as a go-between for them and the Danans to interface, as far as I know. Yeah, again, I didn't look into any of those too much. I avoided as many details as I could. So I also, again, avoided speculation as much as I could, except for relating to things that I already knew about anyway, because I didn't want to have too many expectations going into the DLC other than what I've already got as expectations, just so that I didn't accidentally set a precedent or anything for myself and get disappointed later on or feel like I saw things coming too easily. I kind of want to go into this with as much of a clear mind as I possibly can. So that's the little I know from the trailers and the game show event. Now, the preludes. The Prelude novels. They make me so happy. If you didn't know, just to clarify on it a little bit more, in the run-up to the final week of marketing before Beyond the Dawn released, the Tales team, starting with the Japanese team, basically announced that they were going to release 3 different short stories, essentially, following each of the pairs as a prologue to the DLC. The first one that they released was Law and Rinwell's one, which is called The Two Who Remain the Same. And, I mean, you know what I'm gonna say? I'm biased, but it was so good. By the way, if you want to read them yourself, there will be a link in the description. They are in English. They have been posted in English, which is a blessing, because we never get this sort of thing in English. So just thank you to whoever translated these and localized them and put them up for us to read, because that's amazing. Anyway, so the first one was for Rinwell and Law, and as a brief explanation of what happens, we are 1 year after the worlds have merged. Law is in Menancia, he is on the way to Vicente, and he is escorting a merchant who is coming from Calaglia. The merchant's never been any further than Calaglia, and Law is escorting him to make sure he's safe on his journey, just so that he doesn't get attacked by stray Zoogles. So we open up on Law having finished off the last Zoogle in a fight, and the merchant praising him for his strength and everything and for being able to help with that, and being really surprised at the fact that Menancia still has stray Zoogles as well, even though it's supposed to be safer than the other realms, which I'm guessing that that's got to do with like the reputation that Menancia has as being like a key place of coexistence. You know, they've still got Zoogles, but the coexistence is there. We get quite a bit of world building during these as well. We actually get to learn that all of the Zoogles now are strays. They lost the ability to... The Renans lost the ability to control the Zoogles during the merging of the twin worlds when Lenegis was destroyed. We will learn more about that later, but keep that one in mind. The reason we learn more about it later is because Law doesn't care, which is very funny. This isn't a short summary at all. Anyway, Law is getting glowing recommendations for being very strong and being able to fight off a bunch of Zoogles by himself. So he's a reliable escort working for the Crimson Crows. The merchant asks why Law is going to Vicente. The merchant actually assumes that Law is going there to go to the trading grounds, which would make sense, you would think, but no, he's actually going there to visit someone, and he's very embarrassed about it. Because we all know who he's going to go and see. He's so awkward, it's very funny. But essentially, Law is going to Vicente to see Rinwell. So in the next scene, we actually get to Vicente, to the palace in the library where Rinwell is studying, because of course she is in the library. She's actually translating some ancient Danan, or at least trying to. And as she's studying, Law shows up, and basically they chat for a little bit about the fact that Rinwell somehow doesn't get bored when she's surrounded by books, and that she's struggling with the one that she's on at the minute, and Law is really surprised by that. They talk a little bit about languages, actually, and the fact that Danans used to have several different languages and dialects, which all died out during the course of the Great Conquest. Rinwell hypothesizes that when the Renans were abducted by the Helganquil to be turned into Renans, they either physically could not speak the Helganquil language, or possibly they decided that everyone should speak the same language so that it would be easier to subjugate all of the Danans, essentially. This stuff's really interesting, by the way. I was talking to someone about languages in the Arise world recently, and it was weird to then have the prologue come out and see them talking about the same sort of thing that we had just been speculating about ourselves. Anyway, they talk for a little bit. Rinwell is actually happy to see Law, by the way. She just doesn't admit it, and Law doesn't admit that he's happy to see Rinwell. They're perfect for each other. Essentially, they talk for a while, then Law realises that Rinwell's not had a break in a while. She's probably not eaten or slept in a while because she's got some dried old food on her desk. So he and Hootle force Rinwell to go and sleep. Then part four. Then in the last scene, Law wakes up, he goes out and sits on the palace steps, and he's looking out at Vicente and thinking about how far Vicente has come and how it's like this huge place of coexistence versus Ulzebek, which is obviously where the Crimson Crows are based, which is still very far behind, especially because Calaglia is quite impoverished compared to the other realms. So he's thinking about that, and then Rinwell shows up and they talk for a little bit because Rinwell was worried that Law just left without saying anything, which he hadn't. They have a little moment. And then Law gives Rinwell a letter, and it's from alphen and shionne, and she's very happy to read it. That's your plot summary. That took far longer than it should have. You could have just read it yourself in that time. But I didn't want to go into too much detail because now's the time that we go into detail, okay? So, this prelude, I really enjoyed it. Obviously, we got to see some world building, which is really nice because we've all been curious where the world's been at in Dana. You know, we all have our own speculation as to where it might have gone after the end of Arise. So it's really interesting to see them building it up, you know, with saying about the Zoogles, about Lenegis, about the status of each realm and things. It's very fascinating to see. But at the same time, we're getting to see glimpses of the sorts of character conflicts that we might actually see in the DLC. Because one other thing that I do know about the DLC is that from the sounds of it, there are going to be focuses on different characters who had the main conflicts in the first game. If that makes any in the main game, if that makes any sense. So in the main game, we got to see a lot of Shionne's conflict as she was battling with her thorns and everything that came along with that. You know, getting close to people and keeping away from them, stuff like that. We got to see a lot of Rinwell's conflict with her feelings towards herself and her magic, and her feelings towards Renan's as well. And we got to see a lot of dohalim's conflict with his guilt over the death that he caused online, I guess, and then everything that happened while he was a lord as well, and him trying to atone for all of that and trying to take responsibility, essentially. So we got to see a lot of them, and we got to see a lot of their partners, and we got to see a lot of their partners comforting them and building them up. So we got to see, you know, Alphen helping Shionne immensely so many times. We got to see Law stopping Rinwell from getting her revenge and helping her see that there is more that she can do and a different path she can take that would be better for her. And obviously with Kisara, she helps dohalim to break down this wall that's between them and to really strive for coexistence this time, rather than it's being just an excuse sort of thing. You know, like that's all like Arise base game stuff. So from what I hear in the DLC, they're going to change it up a little bit. So we're actually going to get conflicts with Alphen, Law, and Kisara each having their own like internal conflict and their partners, you know, as an inverse of the main game, comforting them instead. So specifically in the case of Law, what we see a lot in this prelude is that he seems to be having a lot of issues with self-esteem. He mentions in the first, like, technically the second part of it, like it's in 4 parts. I hesitate to call them chapters because they're so short. And the first one is like a couple of lines. But in the first main scene that we see with Law going to Vicente with the merchant, his narration mentions about how he's always making a mess of things right at the very end, which seems to be something that he worries about quite a lot anyway. He's really getting down on himself about it. He does after that go, whatever, which he does quite a lot, but I think it is still something that bothers him, is that it keeps happening. The fact that he's also elated to get praise from the merchant and then is trying to act humble while he's getting that praise is also indicative of the fact that he's trying to be better. He's trying to help people and to basically fill his dad's shoes, essentially. And he's finding it difficult, so whenever he hears something like to confirm that he's doing well, of course he's going to be happy about it. But at the same time, he wants to seem really mature and things, so he can't let people see him get super excited about it. And obviously then he shows his age by being flustered about Rinwell afterwards, but you know, whatever. His feelings for Rinwell are so sweet. He gets upset about Rinwell not seeming happy to see him, and when she gets the letter, she's immediately distracted from him and is more interested in the letter because it's from Shionne, and he's, you know, kind of upset about that, but he's still happy to be with Rinwell, you know, so we can tell that he kind of has a bit of a self-esteem complex in a way. Like, he clearly wants to be better, if that makes any sense. We also get to see Law engaging with Rinwell's interest, again, because he's trying his best. The key theme of this is the Law is trying his best. He's trying to engage with her interest because he actually talks with her about, you know, the languages and stuff, not in that much depth, but he is asking her about it and talking to her about it, which you wouldn't think he would do if he's not interested in that sort of thing, because usually he wouldn't be. He also helps look after her health, obviously, by getting her to go to bed. Again, he's being very considerate and kind, which is his genuine personality anyway, but I think it's interesting to see this as development and to see where that might lead in the DLC, if that makes any sense. Because we also get to see Rinwell's perspective as well. I do think that the partners, as in like Rinwell, Shionne, and dohalim, each seem to be more focused on that person that they're paired with, if that makes any sense. This is a theme throughout the preludes, so we'll talk about all of them. But Rinwell specifically, since we're talking about her, she does seem to be conscious of Law in the sense that, like, she's flustered when he genuinely compliments her, and she... Hold on, let me find the part. Hold on. Word for word, she says, Rinwell made a big show of acting like she didn't care. She'd grown more strategic since they last met. This is when he just showed up. So, like, she's clearly trying to be cool-headed and to seem aloof, but she does care. And again, in the last scene when she finds him, she's actually worried that he might have gone off by himself and left without telling her. And obviously he says he wouldn't do that anyway, but like she genuinely looks relieved to see him still there. So we can see that there's clearly development in that sense, that like she does clearly care about Law and want to see him. She's just not sure how to say it. There is also a moment towards the end. You know when I said that they have a moment? Well, let's talk about that for a second because it's very nice. Rinwell goes up to Law, sees that he's still there, is relieved to see him. Let me just read it out to you. Rinwell sat down beside him without saying a word. After staring in the same direction for some time, she opened her mouth. Thanks. No prob. Silence again. The two listened to the bustling sounds of the streets. Law sensed something and turned to the side, only to find Rinwell staring at him. Was she waiting for him to say something else? Illuminated by the morning sun, Rinwell's face looked somehow different than usual. Suddenly, Law's throat tightened. Oh, that's right, I've got a delivery. He averted his eyes and searched through his pockets. He didn't see how Rinwell responded. He couldn't. Oh, sorry, I'm biased. I love them. I'm biased, okay? I love them so much. So, essentially, Rinwell's clearly conscious about Law in some sort of way, whether she knows how she feels about him or what, I don't know. But the fact that she's just staring at him, it's like, I'm so curious what was going through her head at that point, and obviously we don't get to see that because it's in Law's perspective at that point, and Law is so self-conscious about it that you can't look at her, you can't see her reaction. Ugh. They're so silly, I love them. Anyway, I also get the sense from the prelude that the two of them are finding it difficult to read each other still. So I think that was kind of a thing from the base game anyway, but it's definitely still present in the prelude as well. So Law, obviously, during that part where Rinwell's staring at him, he's not sure what to think about why she's staring at him. He thinks, was she waiting for him to say something else? But he doesn't know for sure, and he can't bring himself to see her reaction when he gives her the letter either, so there's that. And then Rinwell mentioned specifically in her dialogue before that, just after he says that he wouldn't leave and that she needs to get proper rest, she says, or at least her narration says, it was hard to tell if he was speaking from genuine concern or just making up an excuse. She was used to this kind of behaviour. So clearly we can see that the two of them are having some communication issues, which again has been, it's very them. It's very in character. Anyway, I'm gonna try and get back on topic about Law's conflict specifically here. My notes are all over the place, I'm sorry, I'm trying my best. So during that first scene when Law is looking at the palace, it's at the very end of the chapter, he looks out towards Vicent and he looks specifically at Alida Palace, and he is looking at it with a complex mix of emotions, and then he has this line that's just him wondering how Rinwell's doing. Well, it says how she's doing, but you know it means Rinwell. You know it does because she's there in the next scene. Anyway, so what was curious to me was wondering just what that complex mix of emotions he's feeling is. Like, I wasn't sure whether it's because he knows what the contents of the letter that he's giving to Rinwell are about, because I would imagine that he's probably had a similar letter. Either that or maybe he doesn't honestly know and he was just asked to send a letter to Rinwell. I actually don't know about that one. That's interesting to me. Huh. Yeah, I guess maybe they did just read it together. I didn't think about that one. Okay. So maybe it's not about the contents of the letter specifically, maybe it's because of the way that he feels towards Rinwell, you know, getting that pining in there. But it could also be foreshadowing his feelings about coexistence and things, because that is something that we see a little bit later on in the story, just before Rinwell shows up in that last scene. So Law is sitting on the palace steps staring out at the city. Specifically, he is thinking about This is me going all English major, by the way. Like, my entire channel is me going all English major, but this is really me sitting and analysing this. Law's looking at Vicent and he's wondering about whether Ulzebek can be anything like Vicent someday, because again, Vicent is the centre of coexistence. It is the kind of the model city that everywhere else kind of wants, well, you know, wants to be like. It's the ideal place. It's the, what's the word? Not paradise, utopia. It's sort of a utopia. Not quite, but you know. But he's specifically thinking about whether Ulzebek can ever be like that, and then he's thinking about how he was part of the revolution that helped bring down that system of slavery, but also that it's too soon to expect anything to change specifically with the whole society. And then specifically there's a line that says, Law narrowed his eyes at the brightness of the dawn. Now, this is me going all English major, here we go. Does it refer specifically just to Law squinting at the sun? No, it doesn't. Does it? Perhaps. Again, I'm being ridiculous about this. It's possible that it's more about the symbolic dawn of racial harmony that hasn't quite been achieved elsewhere, essentially. I think it could possibly be a way of showing that Law is preoccupied with thoughts about how Ulzebek might come to be more like Vicent. And in addition to this, you might be wondering, well, why is Law so preoccupied with Ulzebek then? And I thought about that for a second and I realised Law might be so worried about it because he's trying to follow in Zephyr's footsteps. Zephyr was the leader of the Calaglian resistance, the Crimson Crows, based in Ulzebek. I think maybe Law was born in Ulzebek? I'm not 100% sure on that one, but, you know, maybe? But essentially, Law has spoken in the main game before about feeling like he should have been there when Ulzebek was liberated, because obviously he ran away from home. So it's possible that it's partially just the fact that he feels so guilty about leaving home that he's trying to make up for it now by helping the people of Ulzebek out to rebuild. Or it's also possible that it's because his dad is dead, which again he feels regret about, that he's now trying to follow in his dad's footsteps and help the city? It's a city, right? Help Ulzebek to develop again. He's trying to figure out how he can help with making Ulzebek a better place, and I'm guessing figuring out how to be more like his dad, because that seems to be a very running theme for Law, which I'm really interested to see what they do with in the DLC actually. Oh, I'm so excited for it. Yeah, another thing slightly related to that is when they're talking about the different dialects and languages that Danans used to have, and the fact that now Danans and Renans speak the same language. Apparently, Law's voice sounds distant when he's saying about how they have the same language now, which really interests me, because again, I'm wondering if that ties into him thinking about coexistence and the fact that there is coexistence in some places but not in others, and he's thinking about how it's going to take a while for everything to change. Who knows? I think that that's going to be a big thing that he is preoccupied with in the DLC. I'm guessing from speculation. It just seems to be something that they're really pushing in this prelude. Yeah, just a couple more notes about this one. We're almost done with Law and Rinwell's one. Don't worry about that. So the only other notes that I had was that there is a line at the beginning of the second chapter where, just before we see it's Rinwell in the library, it says, "The voice in the corner didn't match the dimly lit room with its overflowing bookshelves," which I find very funny. Like, just this whole contrast of this, like, dim, quiet library filled with books. It's very atmospheric, very, I don't know, dark academia, whatever. And then there's Rinwell, this, like, bright and boisterous, now 15-year-old girl, just being excited about her research. Like, good for her. Anyway, the other thing that I have a note about is that the title of it, bringing it back to that, is let me check. The title of it is The Two Who Remain the Same. So each of the titles kind of has a thing about change. So Rinwell and Law they're remaining the same at the minute. At least in this prelude. Which, you know, you can really tell from everything I just said, basically, about what the prelude's about. But it's also nice to see in the narration that they're actually quite satisfied with their relationship as they are. Because it's a sort of stability, I'm guessing, because they've not really had any stability for a long time, and they don't want to lose, like neither of them wants to lose anyone again because they've both lost so much already. And it's nice to have the stability of knowing that that's the way that the two of them are, even if they butt heads sometimes. They're still there for each other. Like Law will still come back and visit Rinwell. Rinwell can still expect Law to show up, etc, etc. Because in this sense as well, they know how to navigate their relationship. It's not confusing or anything because it's them and they're used to it. It's really nice to see that for the two of them. I also really hope that there's some development for them in the DLC. I think that there will be, especially if Law's going through his own conflict and Rinwell's trying to support him through it. I think that there's got to be some sort of development for their relationship. I'm not specifically saying anything about romance, but like, to be fair, these preludes are like shipper bait. Because I am looking at them and I'm thinking, oh, is there going to be more romance? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I don't know what to expect with it. Because I didn't expect romance out of Horizon in the first place. So we'll see. But I also think that the titles of them are kind of like double meaning, so they're applying to the relationship but also to the world, just like how we're getting world building alongside the character development in these. So in a way, we're seeing how Rinwell and Law are in places that do kind of remain the same. So like Vicent is still the paradise it always was, and Ulzebek is still struggling with poverty and with trying to navigate this new world where coexistence isn't quite embedded in the culture of anywhere except for Vicent and for Menancia. So they're in places that do remain the same, and they're not necessarily trying to change things yet, but we shall see. I'm really curious what's going to happen for the two of them in the DLC though. Oh, I'm so excited for it. Anyway, I need to stop talking about my bias. Let's talk about a different pair. Dohalim and Kisara. I actually really liked their prelude as well. It was very sweet. I liked all of the preludes, to be fair, but the Dohalim and Kisara one really surprised me actually. I didn't expect to like it as much. So, their one is called The Two Open to Change, if that gives you any indication. Very short plot summary. Hopefully shorter than the last one, but we shall see. So again, we get a starter passage that's just a little opening. They are technically applicable to the characters, but yeah, no, it's a couple of sentences and they're basically just saying, it's been a year and the worlds are together and they're struggling. We basically get the same information in this story, so it's fine. Okay, so we open up and Kisara and Dohalim are in, and I quote, a room in a building in Pelagian. It's very vague. It gets a little bit less vague later on. They do say that they're on the 3rd floor, I think, or at least Kisara was on the 3rd floor. I'm not sure whether that was because she went there specifically or whether she came out of the building into there. I don't know. We'll talk about that later. Anyway, I'm getting distracted again. So they're in a room in a building in Pelagian. A room specifically designed for office work. On opposite sides of a desk, talking to each other. Essentially, Kisara has brought to Dohalim another letter from Alphen and Shionne. Wow, who'd have thunk it? And basically, Alphen and Shionne want everyone to meet in EOS for an important mission that only they can take care of as the 6 people who united the worlds, etc, etc. Dohalim and Kisara are talking about their plans for that, how they're going to depart. They need to depart immediately if they're going to meet up with everyone on time. And they're talking about whether or not Dohalim can afford to be away because he is a representative for the Renans in Pelagian. Essentially, when Lenegus, during the union of the two worlds, Lenegus was caught in between or something. It was destroyed. The Renans managed to evacuate in their starships, but they were kind of homeless after that because Lenegus is now in pieces in the sky. Essentially. And Ren is gone. It was inhospitable anyway, but it is now also gone. Good thing to know. Anyway, so Dohalim basically got all of the Renans to Pelagian. There weren't that many Renans, to be fair, either, so they can probably all fit into one city because they already did Lenegus. Because we already know that their population is a lot smaller than the Danan population. So all of the Renans are basically on the 3rd floor of Pelagian, and then there are some Danans in Pelagian as well. They're living like that at the moment. We'll get more information on that in a moment, because I did kind of skip ahead there. Dohalim doesn't want to decline. He does want to go with Kisara to help out, even though he's got all of this responsibility that needs to be taken care of. So he's going to try and find someone else to take care of that while he's gone. As they're talking, Kisara is thinking about the letter. And in case you didn't notice, Kisara, as I mentioned before, has been living in Vicent. Who else was living in Vicent? Rinwell. Who gave Rinwell her letter? Law, who isn't innocent. So specifically, either Alphen or Shionne, Kisara realizes, organised this so that Kisara would have to go and see dohalim to give him his letter, and Law would have to contact Rinwell with her letter. We'll get more on that later, but Kisara's kind of realising that the whole idea behind this was that Kisara would go and see dohalim, and Law would go and see Rinwell. So we'll see, we'll learn more about that soon, but keep that one in mind. Again, this is why it seems really shippy. It's because they're gathering the pairs intentionally. So we learn that Kisara has been working in Vicente as the guard captain again. She's been basically training all of the troops to help protect Vicente, which was kind of similar to what she was doing before, but now she's like training people rather than being a personal aide to a lord. The story specifically notes she was supremely distinguished in combat and military matters, and had also come to be seen as a role model, a perfect fit for a city where Danans and Renans lived together. I love Kisara, she's great. Anyway, so Kisara's basically set them some drills. She's not going to be away that long, it'll be fine. So she just came to grab dohalim, go in EOS, sort that out, and then go back. Is what Kisara's thinking. I don't think she'll be gone for as short a time as she expects, but we shall see. We shall see. So apparently, Kisara tells dohalim, when I said I'm going to Prelude, everyone wanted to know when you're coming back. Dohalim says that he's sure everything's running smoothly without him. But Kisara says, it's not so much that they need your help, but that they love you and they miss you. Then dohalim says, I can't stop laughing about it. Everyone, you say. Dohalim is like super subtly flirty. I'm not even looking at this with shipper glasses. I mean, come on. Dohalim turned to Kisara with a questioning look in his eyes, but Kisara evaded his query, saying nothing. Turning down the corners of his mouth in an almost sulky manner, Dohalim rose as if having given up. So, you know, there's that. So essentially, Dohalim's off to go and find someone to fill his place while he's away. Kisara immediately offers to help, and Dohalim seems to be a bit amused by this. He's about to smile, and then he just says, I can handle it on my own. He has to collect himself, and then he says, I can handle it on my own. You can go off for a walk. It's fine, I won't be long. So then we get to the next scene. Kisara's off for a walk. She is looking around. Oh yeah, no, they must be on the 3rd floor. Okay, I'm reading it properly now, it's fine. So Kisara is looking around Prelude. We get a little bit more world building here. We learned that Delpharis Castle, where Volron used to rule from, it's been blocked off completely because they can't tear it down. It is an eyesore, but they don't have the manual labor to be able to tear it down, and they don't want anyone going in there because it's not a great place for anyone because no one has good memories of it. The castle is locked and blocked off to everyone. That feels important to me. I don't know whether someone's gonna sneak in and do something. Maybe. We shall see. We'll find out. Anyway, Kisara's considering how long it might take them to actually get rid of the castle, and then she's thinking about whether it's better to remember the past pain or to forget it. I'm gonna come back to that one later because that's important, so keep that one in mind. She pulls out her old bracelet from her brother and looks at it. Kisara. Basically, she's thinking a lot about the status of Danans and Renans, about the status of the world as a whole. She's thinking about the remnants of the old world because they're now in this sort of new world where everything is different. She's thinking about the fact that Lenegis is destroyed, and she's thinking about specifically the fact that Rena is gone. Actually, I really like how they wrote this part as well. There's quite a bit of world building here about how Danans and Renans are getting on and the state of Pelesian, as I mentioned before. The part that I'm thinking specifically of that's written really nicely. Dana and Rena had become one, but that didn't mean Rena ceased to exist. The spectacle reminded her that she was viewing the loss of Rena from her position on Dana. It was like that even for her, who had been involved in many of the events leading to the current state of affairs. Then what must it be like for the majority of Danans and Renans? Not knowing what she was searching for, Kisara had gazed intently at the sky. See something? Looking back, she saw Dohalim approach from the building's doorway. Quite the contrary. I see nothing. I really like that. Because it's kind of haunting in a way that, like, they still look up to the sky. Like, everyone still looks up to the sky and expects Rena to be there. And technically Rena still exists, it's just now a part of Dana. They're united. But for most people, do they know that? Do they just think Rena was destroyed or something? Do they actually know that the worlds have united properly? Do the Renans just think that their home world is completely gone now? Like, there's a lot of contention in the implications there. And it's really fascinating to think about what that means for the world. But we'll get back to that. I'm digressing. This is supposed to be a summary. So essentially dohalim comes out to talk to Kisara. He's sorted out who's going to be taking his place essentially while he's away. And they're both thinking about the fact that it's confusing how the world has changed and that things would be quite different if Lenegis wasn't destroyed, because dohalim had promised, I'm sure you remember, to be upon Lenegis leading the Renans from there. However, of course, that didn't happen because Lenegis was destroyed. So now he's leading the Renans on Dana. But Kisara is specifically thinking about the fact that the two of them wouldn't have been able to see each other because dohalim would have been all the way upon Lenegis. Kisara pulls herself together and then she specifically it says, Kisara pulled herself together and strengthened her inner resolve. She had to stay firm. That feels like a conflict right there, but we'll get back to that. So essentially they're talking. dohalim is quite proud of himself for having gotten all the preparations done by himself without Kisara's help. Because of course he is, freaking nerd. Kisara's thinking she needs to work just as hard as him, then she realizes, oh, your fastener is crooked. This is ridiculous. She goes and fixes his fastener for him on his clothes because he still doesn't know how to dress himself properly. Which is very funny. And dohalim specifically says, to be fair, I did think this was somewhat of an improvement. Like, at least he got his clothes on, I guess. That is very funny. Anyway, Kisara adjusts his clothes for him, and then they have a moment. I might as well read it out now, because I'll probably end up doing it later. Kisara made quick work of adjusting his clothes as they exchanged words. No matter how much the world changed, this was one thing that hadn't changed at all. It was more a question of whether it would ever change. I do appreciate this. His abrupt, earnest comment caused her to raise her head, bringing them eye to eye. Appreciate what? Having things exactly where they belong. Kisara's hands stopped moving. It took a moment for his words to sink in. She closed her eyes. The energy seemed to drain from her body. She let out a small breath. Slowly, her eyelids raised again. They now revealed a gentle gaze with a sense of companionship, but meant only for one person. Indeed. The two allowed themselves to be immersed in all that was contained in that one little interaction. Would the moment simply pass by and fade away? If so, how would that happen? This she didn't know. Even so. See, this is written really nicely. Like, that's really nice, actually. I like that a lot. But essentially, they have a moment while Kisara's fixing his clothes. Then, specifically at the end of it, one of them extends a hand to the other, and the other accepts it. And then Kisara says, let's get going, Do. She hasn't called him Do this entire time, by the way. She was calling him dohalim before. Now she calls him Do. There we go. She did it. So, that was not a summary. That went on far too long. Anyway. So, I really liked the vibe, actually, of this one. Especially getting to see their relationship, because it's quite different. Like, all of the relationships are quite different. But seeing specifically Law and Rinwell first, who are obviously quite youthful, very awkward with each other, and very lively. And then after that we get to see dohalim and Kisara, who are very gentle and calm in their interactions, and they have really subtle interactions, and they're both clearly willing to let things change between them, like the title suggests, with the two open to change. It's really nice. So, my notes. Again, we see some world building, as I mentioned, but also we see character development and hints of the conflicts that they might have. Hooray! So, we get to see Kisara's uncertainties quite a bit. Her internal struggle with deciding whether it's best to forget the pains of the past or whether we should remember them and learn from them. That specifically, if I get to the right place, because I think I made a note about it. I have two sets of notes here. It's very confusing. I wrote notes as I was reading through each of them the first time, and then I went through them earlier today, and I went back through and made more detailed notes. So I have so many notes, and they're all over the place. Anyway, so she specifically says in her dialogue, in her narration while she's walking, and which was better, to continue to remember or to forget altogether. Harsh memories can start pain, but they can also serve as a warning or a lesson. So it's very much Kisara thinking about whether it's best to remember the pains of the past, to learn from them, to keep them embedded in history and in memory so that they can be learned from, or whether it would be better just to forget about them so that they're not suffering through that pain every time it's dredged back up. And then right after that, she squeezes her bracelet. So she's clearly thinking about the pain of losing her brother, which obviously is a really harsh memory for her, but she still keeps that bracelet on her to remember him by. So I think there's definitely going to be a bit of a struggle for her with that as we go through, because she's, again, clearly thinking about how the Danans and Renans can continue to coexist and coexist better than they are at the minute, especially with all the pains of the past on both sides, really, with the Danans being subjugated by the Renans, yes, but also with the Renans having a fabricated sense of identity, in a sense, and being lied to and having to come to terms with a lot of stuff that I don't think they'll have been told about yet. Because it doesn't sound like they know about it yet. I don't think they would believe them if they got told, so we'll see. So she's clearly thinking about the pains of the past and remembering versus forgetting. I think it really ties in actually to the stuff that happened in Vicent and to keeping her eyes open to the pains of the world going on around her, because she was blinding herself to it for so long. So I think she's definitely going to be thinking a lot about that. So she squeezes her bracelet thinking of Miguel. She thinks about the Renans of Pelagian, the fact that Rena itself is gone, looking at the sky for something that's not there anymore, thinking about how the Renans must feel having lost Rena, which for them was home. Even for Danans, like 300 years ago before the Great Conquest, Rena was seen as a holy place, the afterlife. So it's something that has been embedded in public memory for so long that's suddenly gone. It's a huge change. So that's really interesting. I'm curious how they're going to take that in the DLC. Anyway, going on. She also thinks a lot about herself and dohalim and their relationship, about how he's moving on and taking on his role as he swore to, and how she feels like she needs to work just as hard as him. Everyone is living up to a lot of expectations, but you specifically see the struggle with it with Law and Kisara, and we'll see with Alphen when we get to that prelude, but give us a minute. She's also thinking a lot about where her relationship with dohalim stands, which again makes a lot of sense. They're open to change, as the title goes, and I think that's both in terms of the world changing and in terms of their relationship. Because specifically in terms of their relationship, we obviously see dohalim subtly flirting with Kisara. Let's be real, it's flirting. Anyway, dohalim clearly wants to take their relationship in another direction. He's open to that change, and Kisara, I think, is also open to that change, but she's not specifically saying anything about it. I mean, it would be weird if they got together in the prelude, right? Like, it's not even the actual DLC, so we'll see. But I definitely think the two of them are open to change, and that's a lot because of everything that they've been through. The fact that they both came from Vicent, which was the place filled with change and with coexistence and stuff. They're the two people who are very much the best people to be conducting change and being open to that change. They're going to find it easiest to adjust because they are used to that, and they have already done that in Vicent, in Menancia. They also specifically make a note. This is like a narration thing in the first proper scene. They specifically highlight the differences between Kisara and dohalim, not so much about them being a Danan and a Renan, but in their clothes specifically and in their postures. They very specifically mention Kisara's armor couldn't be more out of place, and yet it didn't seem to bother her in the slightest. Though her upright posture was in marked contrast with dohalim's, they were equally relaxed and looking at each other with the same gentle gaze. So again, they're specifically mentioning these differences between them, the fact that Kisara's armor is out of place, dohalim's clearly not out of place, but Kisara's not bothered. Again, her posture is very good. Mine's is not. Wow. That reminded me that I was slouching. Kisara's posture is very good. dohalim's like relaxed in his chair, but the two of them are still relaxed and looking at each other gently. Probably because despite their differences, their relationship is at a point where a wall is broken down between them, as we kind of saw during their Dake Faisal conversation. They managed to break down a wall between them in the main game, and now they can see each other as equals and be relaxed around each other, which they couldn't particularly do when we first met them, because they had that hierarchy. We get to see a lot of Kisara being very, very responsible about the things that she's doing, her role as a captain, but also feeling like she needs to work harder, because of course she does, because she's that sort of person that will just keep finding ways to work harder and harder and harder. Actually, yeah, I think that's most of my notes for dohalim and Kisara's one. Again, like, I really love it. I think that it's very subtle, very sweet, and that we actually get a lot of really interesting world building from it. And I'm really curious to see what they do with dohalim and Kisara in the DLC as well, especially with Kisara's conflict, because I feel like Kisara was kind of the least served in the main game. Like, all of them developed in a sense, but Kisara's was so subtle, and She didn't get a spotlight put on her as much as some of the other characters. Like, even comparing to Alphen and Law, I would say that they got more than Kisara did, really, because Kisara's is very internal and very subtle, and she's caring about other people so much. So it's going to be really interesting to see Kisara struggle with things and hopefully be supported by others for once. I don't know, I'm really looking forward to see what they do with her. I really like Kisara as a character, so I really want to see them do more with her. I really do. Anyway, enough about them. We have one more prelude to talk about. And of course, it's alphen and shionnes. Now, the thing with alphen and shionnes is that they just released it yesterday, I want to say? Or was it today? Was it today? It was today, wasn't it? It was like last night. It's very fresh. It's hot off the press. So I've read through it twice, but I've not had as much time to think about it. So we'll get there. But let's go through and do a summary. Hopefully a short one this time, but we'll see. Alphen and shionne are, first we see them in a cavern sort of place, a cave. The two of them are going through together. There's a lot of water droplets, there's a lot of dripping. Actually, the descriptions of this one are lovely. Like, just speaking from a writing perspective, I really like the... let me have a look, hold on. I might as well just read this whole first part because it's lovely, hold on. Water droplets dripped down as if to mark the passing of time, a tranquil echo throughout the dark, rocky space. The dripping was soft, soon swallowed up by the cold dampness and returning to silence. Without warning, a new sound disrupted the quiet. It was the boisterous irregularity of splashing puddles, a contrast to the dripping droplets. Then the unmistakable sound of human breathing and cloth scraping against metal. Gotta skip a little bit, and then... Not everything in the cave was natural. In places there were signs of human activity, from sculptures to masonry such as walls and stairs seemingly half melted into stone. Their complex forms created a peculiar dance of shadows in the swaying light of the fire. There were no signs of anything else moving besides the two of them, so silent as to be uncanny, and yet they walked on unbothered, as if nothing could frighten them as long as they were together. Oh, I love that! Specifically, the peculiar dance of shadows in the swaying light of the fire is lovely. That image. Oh! Can you tell I have an English degree? Anyway, they're going through this cavern together in their contrasting outfits of black and white, as it mentions. Not everything in the cave is natural, they're seeing a lot of ruins and things. Alphen mentions one of them having an interesting shape, and he's thinking about how they're evidence of 300 years ago with the Great Conquest, thinking about just how many relics and ruins there are, specifically seeing Rinwell might be able to explain if she was there, because she's their historical expert, a 15-year-old girl, as opposed to the 300-year-old man who doesn't remember much from 300 years ago, as he then mentions. He specifically says, even if he tried to recall them, such memories completely eluded him. It was probably more a matter of interest than memory, and there was nothing he could do about that. So clearly, Alphen is struggling to remember things from 300 years ago, even though he feels like he should. And part of it might just be because he doesn't care. Not specifically about 300 years ago, but maybe about like the ruins and the history and whatever. They're walking, and then Shionne sees some water on the stairs that they're going down, so they walk along the wall instead, specifically avoiding the water. Then Shionne stops moving beside some water, and they're very adamant that this water looks exactly like a mirror. Exactly like a mirror, it says twice. And then Alphen realizes it's the hollowing. So we're seeing some of the hollowing in these ruins. Apparently ever since the merging of Dana and Rena, I'm guessing because Rena was just so hollowed, there's now a bunch of places on Dana that have the hollowing, mostly underground, but they can find it basically anywhere on Dana, and they don't really know what the hollowing is, because it's the death of matter, but what does that mean for them? Is it safe to even touch? That sort of thing, so they just kind of avoid it. So they do that here. Again, the world building, sublime. I'm learning so much. Then we get some follow-up on those letters that we know about. Shionne says, come to think of it, I wonder if our letters arrived safely. And Alphen's like, oh, yeah, no, it'll be fine. The merchant that I sent them with is reliable. It's okay. And then he goes, oh, hold on, Shionne. Why did you ask Kisara to tell dohalim and then Law to tell Rinwell? I really like this line, hold on. Shionne says, why? She seemed troubled for a moment. Then a look of exasperation mixed with anger came over her face. He was such a simpleton. Like Shionne. I love her so much. I'm glad that she's still sassy. Oh gosh, she's great. She's so good. Anyway, Shionne says she finds it unfair that Law and Rinwell and dohalim Kisara don't get to see each other as often as Alphen and Shionne do. Alphen hears that and his face grows tense. We'll keep that one in mind for later. Keep that one in the back pocket. So Shionne asks, do you think I'm meddling too much? He says, no, I don't think so. Shionne slips on a pebble. Like immediately after that, but Alphen manages to catch her and ends up hugging her against him, and then holds onto her hand after he's not hugging her anymore. And basically we get to hear a little bit about the fact that Shionne's thorns are obviously gone. She can now touch people, and she actually finds herself reaching out to other people unthinkingly. Like, Shionne, she's come so far. Oh, I love that for her. Anyway, so she's thinking about the fact that she's reaching out to people without thinking. Alphen's thinking about the fact that, thank goodness, Shionne can actually touch people now, and it's such a difference from last year, and it makes Alphen really happy. Shionne lets go carefully so as not to seem cold. We'll come back to that one later because there's a bit about that one that we need to talk about. Specifically the fact that the narration here says, how did she feel about him? We'll come back to that. Keep that one in your back pocket. Okay, we're filling our back pockets here. So they're almost at the exit. They walk off. Alphen is worried that she might stumble again, blah, blah, blah. So they leave. We're in the next scene now. They leave this cavern and they're out in the open. And apparently, in the distance, there is a structure that doesn't look Danan or Renan. It's been constructed by the Helganquil. It's some sort of a Helganquil ruin, and a bunch of them are now on Dana in various places of the world, just with the top exposed above ground with most of it below ground. And apparently, again, more world building. We're getting so much world building here. More I would say with everyone except for Law and Rinwell. Law and Rinwell is more like historical world building, mostly because Law doesn't care. I find that very funny. Anyway, so we specifically get the little tidbit of information that there are dots of light dancing silently in the air, and it's astral energy, according to what they've heard from Rinwell, because she's their #1 information resource, this 15-year-old girl. The lights are likely remnants of the astral energy that failed to materialize at the time of merging of the worlds. I'm reading this straight from the thing, by the way. They were energy that had overflowed when the twin worlds had their 5 elements had become one world with 6, because light was only on Dana and darkness only on Rena. Now everything's all together. It was a harmless and not particularly rare phenomenon, but it was yet another one that hadn't existed before the events of the last year. So essentially, there's now like stray astral energy and stuff flying around, which is really interesting. Oh, I love this world building. It's so good. So they're talking about Shionne's like, oh, this really makes me think about how the world's changed. And Alphen's like, the only thing that hasn't changed is people's hearts and minds. There's a hint of cynicism in his voice. We'll come back to that. Keep it in your back pocket. Why is that the theme of this one? Anyway, so they're thinking about the changes in the world, about society and stuff, because everyone's thinking about that. Shionne is thinking about the fact that Alphen has this position on his head now as the Blazing Sword. Like, everyone knows him now. He can't really go anywhere without drawing attention. And Shionne realizes that's not something he asked for ever. She... Specifically what the dialogue said, the narration says here. She wanted to be close to him, just as he had once saved her. She now wanted to support him, but Alphen never tried to rely on her. Shionne found it vexing. Back pocket. Anyway, just as she's about to talk to him, someone calls out for help. Because of course they do. So Alphen's already running towards the person to help them. Because of course he is. So it's just a traveller, a Danan traveller, who's being attacked by a stray Zoogle. So we get a fight scene. We actually get a fight scene. They're so hard to write, like, great job. This was actually really, it's pretty good. It's short, but it's nice. So they're talking about how none of the Zoogles can be controlled by Renans anymore. It's a sense of equality for Danans and Renans being attacked by Zoogles, which isn't great, but you know, whatever. Alphen stops overthinking, saving the person comes first. They start fighting it. Shionne's bullets don't go super far into the Zoogle because of its fur, but Alphen is slicing it directly with his sword. The claws are really lethal, blah blah blah. Basically they fight. Shionne manages to knock it out of the air when it pounces. Alphen kills it with the blazing sword. Then he asks if the traveller is okay once the Zoogle is dead, and the traveller is like, oh, thank you, I was saved by the legendary blazing sword. Oh, I'll tell my friends. Basically. Alphen's tense as soon as he's called the blazing sword, because again, he doesn't want this moniker on him. Put it in your back pocket, we're coming back to it. We do get a little paragraph about the fact that Alphen doesn't want to be called the Blazing Sword, and about how he's got this moniker on him, and yet he still uses the Blazing Sword. That's the kind of person he is. And Shionne specifically has this moment of The fact that Alphen sounds worried about Shionne when she's clearly lost in thought, and she wants to help support him. The way that he always puts himself second for others, she wants to put herself second and support him instead. So she says that she's fine. Interesting. Anyway, that's where that scene ends. And then the last scene, the last little scene here is just 3 little snippets. We get to see Lord Rinwell leaving Vicente excited. We get to see dohalim and kisara leaving Pelagian, specifically saying that they're not forgetting anything and that they can always count on each other. I'm guessing that's dohalim saying you can always count on Kisara. If I was reading this in Japanese, it would actually be a lot easier to realize because of the variable ticks and stuff, but I'm not, so it's fine. And then we get to see Alphen and Shionne, looking forward to seeing their friends again. And then it ends with a new journey in a new world, new encounters await with the start of a new story. To be continued in Tales of Arise Beyond the Dawn. Oh gosh, I'm so excited for it. So, we've got some really interesting notes in here. My basic reaction to it was, like, I really liked the prose of it. I actually really liked some of the stuff in the prologue as well. We'll talk about that in a moment. The fact that Alphen and Shionne clearly really care about each other was very sweet. I found the reveal about the letters very funny. I've got my main notes here. Let's go off of these. So, once more, with feeling, world building. There is so much world building in these. Specifically, again, for Alphen and Shionne and dohalim Kisaras, they have so much world building. Law and Rinwell obviously have a little bit, but of course, on top of all that, we get to see the character development. And again, we're seeing a lot for Alphen and Shionne here. So specifically with Shionne, we're seeing how she wants to support Alphen, but she's kind of struggling with it. And for Alphen, we're seeing that he's struggling with his identity and the title that he's stuck with. He never wanted to be a hero, always felt like he was wearing a title that he shouldn't have. Even in the main game, before he even loses the mask, you know, it's things about wearing the armor that feels wrong on him because it's like a hero's armor. It's like the weight of it, like the symbolic weight of it rather than the physical weight, because it's actually quite light. And also using the blazing sword feels wrong in his hands. Things like that. It's very much, as soon as he realizes that he was a sovereign, he's very opposed to it, specifically from the sense that he doesn't feel like he's deserving of that. Mostly because of what happened on Lennigus 300 years ago, because he lost control that one time and ended up killing a lot of people. So he's clearly still struggling with that. And now he's still struggling with the fact that he is the blazing sword and everyone knows him. It's really prevalent throughout that. It's something that we get to see a lot of. Alphen specifically uses the blazing sword because more than anything he wants to help people. No matter how painful the moniker is for him to be known as the blazing sword, he still uses it because again, he can still help people with it. Essentially, he's kind of carrying this burden and the weight of his responsibility and his title with him, and he's really struggling with that clearly because he doesn't want it, but at the same time he wants to help people. I think in a way as well he's struggling a lot with the fact that he is responsible for a lot of the changes happening in the world, because he's the one with the blazing sword. He's the one that everyone blames essentially for whatever's happening to the world with the fact that Ren is gone. They don't know, maybe, I'm guessing, that the worlds are united, but we'll get there, we'll get there. There's been a lot of changes, and essentially Alphen's become the, not so much scapegoat because he was involved, but he is the one that everyone knows to blame for it. Now, in regards to the title of this one is The Two That Want to Change. So that's very indicative of the fact that the two of them they want change both in the world and in their relationship. Clearly, it's actually the most active title out of the three of them, because obviously Law and Rinwell are in a position where they are unchanging, and Kisara and dohalim are open to change but not necessarily changing, whereas obviously Alphen and Shionne want to change. They're in a position where they are actively like, yes, I want to change, and again applies to the world and their relationship, so keep that one in mind. The prologue of this story is I'm calling it prologue. It's like the first couple paragraphs in the very first part. And I feel like it's really reflective of that. I mean, they're all applicable in different ways, but this one particularly stuck out to me. The specific part that interested me is, restless hearts seek someone to become the focus of their feelings without even knowing how the other person may feel. So naturally people are placing their feelings on Alphen, either seeing him as a hero or as a pariah. They're thanking him and also blaming him all at once. He's receiving so many people's feelings, so many people's blame. But in a way, I'm wondering whether Alphen and Shionne are kind of placing their focus on each other because of their restless hearts. I'm wondering if that's maybe how Shionne feels about Alphen. So this is mostly speculation, but I find it interesting. Alphen clearly has a bit of a target on his back. He's got a name that everyone knows him by. He's got a legacy as being the one to unite the world, get rid of whatever, you know, free Dan of slavery. We know from the main game that all he wanted was to be able to just settle down and live a quiet life in a house where all he needed was a bed that was comfy and a roof over his head. And when he spoke to Shionne about it, the two of them were coming up with their ideal little house, the little cozy kitchen that they could cook in together and stuff like that. You know, they want a quiet life together. And I do wonder if he now feels like everything he bears is going to be a burden on Shionne, since it must seem to him like a quiet life is now kind of impossible, since again, everyone knows who he is. Can he really live a quiet life at that point? They still have so far to go in uniting the worlds, and I think that could potentially be the source of whatever conflict that the two of them might have during the DLC, since Shionne seems to be wondering where the relationship stands in this prelude. Alphen clearly loves and cares about her, as you can see in the narrative, especially when he helps her when she falls and things. You know, you can clearly tell that Alphen is happy that she can touch people and happy about how far she's come, and he really cares about her. And like, he's always checking on her because he's worried. But at the same time, if they've not progressed at all in their relationship since the end of the game, I think it's probably more because of Alphen's concerns than it is about Shionne's concerns. If that makes any sense. We'll come back to it. We'll come back to it. I'll talk about it a bit more. We're getting there. Alphen's clearly cynical about the world as it is at the minute when he says that the only thing that hasn't changed is people's hearts and minds. He doesn't think that coexistence is going well so far. But we've also got that line about Alphen never tried to rely on her, Shionne found it vexing. Because again, Alphen is still using the blazing sword no matter how painful it is. Shionne wants to help him. She wants to support him and stand beside him. But Alphen's the one who's not leaning on her because he feels like he needs to be strong and probably not be a burden, especially knowing everything Shionne has literally just been through a year ago. He probably wants her to be able to live happily and peacefully, but here he is dragging her around the Helganquil ruins, never mind the fact that Shionne wants to be there to support her. So basically Alphen's just taking her to places and feeling like, oh, well, does she really want to be here? Like, should I let her go and live her own life? But Shionne wants to be there with him. She's traveling with him because she wants to be there, because she loves him. This is important information. I do also find it interesting that Alphen grows tense when he realises why Shionne sent the letters to everyone. She says about the others not getting to see each other as often as Alphen and Shionne do, and I'm wondering whether that's because he feels like he's dragging Shionne around so much, or maybe that he feels bad that he's put them in this situation where they all have to be spread out, since, again, he was the one that basically united the worlds. But it was also everyone's own choice to do whatever they're doing after the game, so I don't know, it depends on where Alphen's headspace is at this point, but I do wonder just how much he's taking on, how much of a burden of the blame he is taking on himself. So we get to see a lot of Shionne worrying about Alphen. I made a specific note of the passage that says, "He sounded worried. Yes, he was always like that, putting himself second. She wanted to do the same for him. She felt that way right this moment. So again, Shionne really wants to look out for Alphen. However, there is one little bit at the end of the first scene that confused me slightly with the narrative, because it's third person omniscient, so we're kind of seeing into everyone's heads, but because we're seeing into everyone's heads in the same chapter, it's difficult to tell just who is thinking what when it just uses language that's not specifically designating something to a specific character, if that makes any sense. So the specific part I'm talking about is at the end of the first proper scene. It's page 2 in the story. Page 2? Yeah, page 2 in the story. The very end of that, which the first time I read it, I was like, oh, well, why is Shionne worried about how Alphen feels towards her? Shouldn't she know by now? But let's think about that one a little bit more carefully, because I'm very confused with the POV here. So I'll read this out because it makes it a little bit easier. So Alphen's thinking about the fact that Shionne can reach out to others now. Though she was still on guard around those she wasn't close with, it was a major change from just a year earlier. Though her slip had been a close call, this awareness of the past and present made Alphen happy. So this part's clearly in Alphen's POV. Then right after that we get, how did she feel about him? Shionne suddenly, albeit carefully so as not to seem cold, let go. Let's keep moving. We're almost at the exit. With that, she walked off briskly, as if to avoid letting him see the look on her face. Alphen frantically followed behind, worried she might stumble again. And then that's where that scene ends. So let's talk about this a little bit. First time I read it, I assumed that the how did she feel about him was in Shionne's POV, because we're getting Shionne then suddenly, albeit carefully, not as to seem cold. So are we seeing from her perspective that she's trying not to be cold with him? Because I think that whole part is maybe Alphen's point of view rather than Shionne's. Because maybe Alphen does realize that Shionne is trying not to be cold with him, but he doesn't quite know how she feels about him, if that's the case. So let's think about this one a little bit. Alphen is happy that Shionne can reach out to others. So I'm wondering if he's the one who's wondering how Shionne feels about him. I'm guessing that might be the case, like he still can't read her fully. Like he wonders whether she really loves him the way he loves her. He realizes she's trying not to be cold with him, but doesn't quite know her specific feelings, I'm guessing. Because then there's the fact that she walks off briskly. Like, is she embarrassed? Is she unhappy? What on earth is going on there? Is she frustrated with him? I mean, I'm guessing that she's probably frustrated with him, but we don't know the specifics just yet. Like, this is, again, it's completely me just speculating. But I do wonder, maybe it even applies to both of them. But I think Shionne probably knows how she feels about Alphen at this point. I think it's more an Alphen problem of him not wanting to place a burden on her and not wanting to assume her feelings or anything. Because here's the thing, they kissed at the end of the game, but Alphen never got to tell Shionne what he was going to tell her on Dake Faisal that we saw. We might just assume that they did afterwards. However, I don't know whether the dev team think that, because now this isn't technically canon anymore, I suppose. They had a first anniversary party. I've spoken a little bit about it in my review, I think. They had a first anniversary party where they had kind of a scenario skit of where everyone might be a year ahead. Again, I think this is non-canon now because of the DLC, but we'll see. But one of the few things that I know about that was that Alphen, after a whole year, had not told Shionne that he loves her. So that's what makes me wonder whether this is actually Alphen's POV and he's wondering how she feels about him, and that's maybe why he hasn't told her that he loves her. I don't know. It's very confusing. So I don't know. We'll see how their relationship develops in the DLC. But it's really curious what kind of a choice that they've made with this. At the moment, I'm choosing to speculate that it's Alphen wondering about Shionne and that Shionne's actually more sure about her feelings. But you never know as well, because Shionne has been in a situation where she was a lab rat for so very long that she might find it really difficult to even tell how her own feelings are with relationships and stuff. Because, you know, she didn't really have any friends before she met these people, and she didn't even let herself be friends with them for a really long time into their relationships. So it's very much a case of, well, does she maybe not realize just how she feels towards him? Who knows? It's something to speculate over, at least until I can play the DLC, which technically now releases in 2 hours time. I'm not playing it in 2 hours time, I'm going to bed first, but yeah, so essentially there's a lot of information that we're finding in these preludes. There's a lot of questions that they definitely come up with for me, especially with how Alphen is. That's something that I'm really interested in, actually, what his conflict's going to be like. But no, I'm so curious about so many things for this. Yeah. So that's the preludes. Closing thoughts. I really liked the preludes. I think that they're a really fun way to lead up to the DLC coming out as well, because it does catch you up to speed a little bit. Obviously, I don't know how exactly they're going to be with the DLC. I'll find that out when I've actually played the DLC. We'll find out. But I really enjoy the fact that they did these. It's so nice to have something like this and to be able to experience it, because, you know, usually this sort of stuff doesn't get translated and it's mostly for the Japanese audience rather than the English audience, which is a shame, because it's something that a lot of us fans have been super excited about ever since they announced it. And again, it's lovely to see this context of where everyone's at. Oh, I love it a lot. And again, it's giving such intrigue into what they're going to do with the DLC and with all the characters in it. Oh, I'm so excited now. Like, getting to read these has really made me even more excited to see the DLC. Oh, man, it's going to be fun. Anyway, I think I've probably talked for long enough. Essentially, TLDL, I guess. The preludes were good. I've learned a lot. There was lots of world building, lots of character hints. And now I'm just very curious to play the DLC and see what all of it has been leading up to. So I'm really excited. Anyway, I'll stop. I'll shut up. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the speculative video. Let me know down below what your thoughts are on Beyond the Dawn, without spoilers, please, if you feel like it. if you feel like it. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed whatever footage was on screen, because I'm still not quite sure what's going to be on there. I'll figure it out. And again, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a great day, night, or whatever the time is for you. And I will see you next time.
How much dough are you still?
I don't know why.
You think that'll cover it?
Yeah, I think that would cover it, yeah. Oh, I think that would definitely cover it, thanks.
Oh, that's on my video now, hooray. Look at the Sprat's money. Wow.
There's tons of it sitting through there.
Well, that's going in the blooper reel.
It's yours now.
Thanks.